Hello everyone, in today's video we'll be looking at common text file related tools. Some of the tools we'll be looking at will be cat, which we are very familiar with from previous videos, less, more, tail, head, sort, cut, and WC. So let's get right into it. Now on my desktop, if I change directory to my desktop and I do a list, we'll see that I have two files. One is a let's just do LH, and then we see that one is 448 bytes while the other is 1020 kilobytes with the K appended to it. The human readable form is the H, like we discussed in a previous video. Okay, so now let's see what we have in the text file. Now these are just sample files I downloaded online, and they don't contain anything really meaningful, but it will help us to see how we can manage and do various things with text files. Okay, so I'm just going to press F and then press tab again, sorry, T. Okay, and then displays all that we have in that file. Now let's look at the bigger file. So if I say cat sample and then to press tab to autocomplete, and then we see it displays everything, just dumps everything on the screen. Now this may not be somewhat effective if I was not in the GUI mode. If I was not in the GUI mode and I was in a single user mode or a CLI mode, this would not be effective because I wouldn't be able to scroll. In this case, I'm able to scroll because I'm in the GUI mode. But what if I was in the CLI mode and I was not able to scroll? Then it will mean that I need to find some other tool to do the job. Now there are two other tools that can help me um, display. Well, there are many more than just two, but then there are two that we'll be looking at now to see how they behave and how they you can use them to manipulate files. The first one is more. Now we could say more and then specify the file name, and then the file name is sample 2. We'll be using the bigger one, and then we press enter. Now with more, it displays page by page. So if I press the space bar, then it shows me a new page, and this is more manageable than just dumping everything on the screen like cat would. So depending on the size of the text file, you can either use cat or more. Okay, however, there are limitations to using more as well. Now for us to exit more, we'll press Q on our keyboard and it takes us back to our regular prompt. Now in this case, would as you can see, it's not possible for us to do search. It's not possible for us to edit the text. We can only see the text page by page. And just before I move on to less, it's also possible for us to, I'm going back into that text file. As we move and pressing spacebar, it tells us how many percent, the percentage of how much text, of how far we have gone in the text. So as we see here, we have 10%. Now if I wanted to go back, I just press B and then it takes me back, and then spacebar takes me forward. Okay, so those are just some of the things that you can do with more. You can go back and forth pages, and then of course you can quit. Now with less brings in more functionality to the table. With less, we can search, we can uh, edit the file by opening the file in a preferred text editor, and of course it can also view these pages. It can also view these files uh, page by page. So let's just go right into it. Less, and we have sample to, and then tab, and then there we go. Okay, now another thing that we can do with less is we can go to the end of the file, and we can go to the beginning of the file right from the get-go without going page by page. So I could just press end on my keyboard and it takes me to the end of the file. I could press home on my keyboard and it takes me back to the beginning of the file. Okay, so now if I wanted to search, I could use the slash sign and then type my string. Let's just use let's use this as our search string. So I'll type TURPIS and then I press enter. Now if I wanted to see how much more this occurs, and then I'll press N for next, so it shows me how it occurs through the text file. If I wanted to see the previous ones, like this, the previous hits on that search, I press capital N, which is basically shift N. It takes me backwards that way. Okay, so, and that's how to search down the file. If I wanted to if I were at the end of the file and I wanted to search upwards without using shift N, I could also use the question mark and then type topics. Okay, and then it will take me up. So this search would actually go up instead of down. It will, this search, upwards instead of downwards, like in the case of the other search. So you can search both ways and then use the n, small n and capital N, to navigate through your search. Okay, now I'm just pressing N to see the next, and it's taking me upwards because I used the question mark, unlike when I use the slash, it will take me down by when I press small n. If I press shift N, now it will take me downwards all the way to the end of the file. Okay, so those are the ways to um, search through a file. Now if I wanted to edit the file, and say I wanted to edit this last piece and then make it small t, I'll press V on the keyboard, and then now I'm able to edit in my default text editor, which is Vim. So now in my default text editor, of course, we've seen in the previous video that in order to edit, we need to press I. Okay, now that we're in the insert mode, we can go into that line, because I see that the entire paragraph is a line. So we go into that line and then edit the topics. Okay, so if you press Control and your arrow button to take you word by word instead of character by character, the transversal will be word by word and not character by character like this. Now I'm not pressing Control. If I press Control, it takes you word by word. Okay, so now I'm here at PT. Now I can change that to small t. and then I can press my escape to go back into the escape mode, and then I can quit without saving. However, since I made a change, it wouldn't let me quit unless I do that forcefully, showing that I'm sure that I don't want to save that change. Okay, so either I do that or I save changes and exit. In this case, I'm going to save the changes and exit. Okay, so now I'm back to less, and if you look at that text now, it is now small t. Okay, so we see how less is able to pass us into a, a default text editor, and of course we can see more of these key bindings by pressing H, and then it shows us all the things that we can do with less. Okay, so that's that about that. um, I'm just going to quit. I press Q to quit that key binding help file, and then I'm going to press quit to further quit this. Okay, so the next tool we're going to talk about is head. Now with the head command, we can decide to list the top of a file, the top lines of a file, whereas with another command called tail, we can decide to list the bottom command of a file. Or sorry, not command, the the bottom lines of a file. We can either specify the number of lines we want to um, display, or just head and then the name of the file. So let's take a look at how that works. Now of course, if we have head like this, we could press alt and then the full stop sign on our keyboard to bring up the 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 previous file that we worked on, and then we can press enter, and then we see it displays. Now if I wanted just two lines or just even one line from that file, I could say head -1 and then press enter, and then it displays just the first line, which is all of this. Now let's use a different file where each line is more distinguishable. Now let's take an instance of our /etc/password file. Now to do that, I'm going to have to change users to my root user, give the password, and then I'll copy /etc/password to my present working directory, and that's done. Now we'll let's switch back to our regular user. Okay, now in my regular user, and I'm going to let's view that file and see the contents of that file. Yes. Okay, so we'll do a cat to view the entire file, just dump it on the screen, and okay, and we see that it's a very long file, and so now let's use head to see the top of the file. Okay, so use head, and let's say pass wd, and then you see here that it displays everything. So now we do head, and then we specify the number of lines that we want to see, and we just want to see the first 5 lines of our pass wd. Okay, okay, so here we see that it has just displayed our 5 lines. Now, because of this previous displays, a bit difficult to see that it actually worked. So we would clear screen, and so that we have a clean and clear screen so that things are easy to see. Okay, so now let's do that head again. Head for 5 lines, and we want to see our pass WD. Okay, and then we see that those are the first 5 lines in that file. If we wanted to see the last 5 lines, we would say tail pass WD. Okay, and that shows us the last 5 lines of that file, starting at SSHD up to one. Okay, so this is another method to display lines, based on whether they are the first, they are the top or at the bottom. For the bottom lines, we use tail. For the top lines, we use head. And of course, all of that information will be dumped on the screen, just like how the more works. With more, it just dumps everything on the screen, and we see that with less, it doesn't dump everything on the screen. It takes you into some other other display, and once you're done and you quit, takes you from there, just like how the VI works or the Vim works, takes you back to your initial shell. Okay, so that's those are some of the things, some of the tools that we we are to be using in for our text, to manipulate our text files. Another thing that is possible is for us to use tail with an option of F. And let's take an instance of this particular file slash var slash log and messages. Okay, and permission is denied because we are not in a privileged mode. So we'll change to root and enter the password here. Let's see now. Tail. Let's do that again. Tail var log messages. Okay, and then we see that it shows us the very last event um, that happened, and the prompt is there waiting, and it's just going to be persistently be blinking and be showing us in real time as things happen. If you check my computer time is 2054, and you can see that this is 2054 as well. So this event just happened. Another way that this could be useful, the hyphen F option, is if you had a web server running on your computer, and then you wanted to know, you wanted to see messages as how people are accessing that server and all of that. You could do a tail hyphen F on the log file of the web service. Okay, so that's another use for the tail command. Now let's look at the cut command. Now I'm just going to Control C to stop this, and then now let's talk about the cut command. Now we're going to use um, certain options in the cut command, and the options that we'll be looking at of the cut command. Note that all of these commands and tools that we've been talking about all have different options that could be used, but we're looking at the common ways that these tools can be used. So the cut command. Now with the cut command, we're going to be using, let's clear the screen. We're going to be using a, a an option hyphen D, and D just is delimiter. Now a delimiter is something that separates two strings. Most of the time the delimiter we have in our strings are spaces. At other times we could have other symbols. Okay, and then -f helps us to select the field, and then finally we tell it what file we want to work on. Now let's take a look at a file. Let's just tail looking at the last 5 lines of, or last 2 lines of our pass.wd again, and in here we see this um, this list, and in the last line you see my name, and then we see an X, we see 1000. Now when we start user management in a video to come, we will see what exactly all of these things mean. But for now, we can see here that the separator or the delimiter in these lines, these 2 lines, is a colon, because you see that there's a colon here separating this from that and from the other, and you know. So if I wanted to display only these names, TCP dump, Orolua, root, and all of those of this particular file, cut would be the perfect tool to do that. Or if I just wanted to display the shells uh, that each of the users have, cut would be our best bet to do this. So now I'll say cut. In this case, let us just get the first field. Okay, so cut. What do I want to cut? I want to cut delimiter, using the delimiter. What's the delimiter in this case? Colon. And the field I want is the first field, and the file is pass.wd. Okay, so if I press enter, you see that I get Orolua, just like it should be. Okay, so that's one way to do that. Then of course um, I could pass this into a file. Let's say, okay, just before I pass it to the file, let's touch usernames. Okay, on the desktop, and now that I've done that, instead of just displaying it on the screen, I could pass it into that file. So I'll just say pass it into username. So I'm redirecting like we discussed in the previous video. Okay, and that's it. So now if I go into that file, I could use, let's say, head, and I want to see the first 5 usernames on my computer, and then I just say usernames, and then it shows me root, bin, German, ADM, LP. Okay, so these are the first usernames. Now if I wanted to also harvest their shells, the shells that each of those users would be able to access, then I can also do a touch and say uh, user shell. Okay, and then I'll do the cut. But in this case, since let's just display two lines so that we can analyze and see before we do the cut. Okay, so now we can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the seventh field or the seventh column is where our shells are for each of those users. Now you see TCP dump 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so that's consistent. So it means that we can request for the field 7 and store that in our file name called user shells. Okay, so let's just do that cut again. So cut the delimiter again here is colon. The field we want is the 7th field, and the file we want to cut from is passwd, and we want to redirect the output into user shells. Okay, and then we press enter. Okay, so now if we let's just tail user shells underscore tab shells. Okay, now we see that many of them are sbno login, and the final one is being bash. Okay, so that's how that's how it's possible. So now if you compare it with tailing passwd, you see that this is what was harvested. We harvested our sbno login from here, from here, from here, from here, and like that down up to the bin bash, which belongs to us. That's the shell we are able to get once we log in. Okay, so that's one use of cut, and that's how cut can be used. The next thing we're going to be looking at is sort. So now if we do the sort on our usernames, we see that the order in which our usernames appear has changed. Now it's alphabetical. Unlike before, when the Orolua was the last uh, username, we now see that these names are now um, in alphabetical order. Okay, and that's what the sort will just help us do, help us rearrange our whatever the number of lines we have to do an alphabetical order of that. Now it's also possible to do another tool that we can use is WC, and WC helps us to count words, lines, characters depending on what we want. Okay, so if we wanted to count the number of words in a particular file, we'll do WC -W and then the username being our file, and must have made a mistake somewhere. Oh, usernames. Okay, and it says that there are 43 words. If I wanted to know the number of lines that there are, I do W. Yeah, so if we did that same the number 43 is the same in this case because we only have one word per line. Now if we did that on our passwd, we'll get different results. Now if we did passwd number of lines 43, if we did number of words, we see that the number of words are 87 because we have different different words in that particular file on each line. Okay, then if you wanted to know the number of characters that were in a particular text file, we do a C-C, and if we did that, we see that there are 2,279 characters in that particular file. So these are some of the tools, common tools that we can use to get different information our from our from our from the Linux operating system. Okay, so lastly, this video is getting a bit too long, and I don't want it to be too long. But very quickly, let me talk about grep. And the grep helps us to search through text files to identify particular lines that have certain strings. Okay, so in this case, I'm just going to say I'm looking for Lua or Ore in my pass.wd file, and immediately it shows me the line that contains that string. If I wanted to look for the root in the same file, I could just say root, and it will show me just that. Okay, so two lines have roots in them. Now it's also possible to specify grep if we're not sure of the um, what's it called now, the case in which the word appears. We could ask grep to be insensitive to the cases, so ignore cases. So basically that will be by an hyphen I, and then we'll specify um, the search string. In this case, I'm just going to put Lua in capital letters, and then in pass wd, and then press enter, and then it still shows us that same line because it ignored cases. Okay, so and so that those are some of the tools that some of the common tools that can be used to manipulate uh, text files in different scenarios.